And welcome back to America Right Now. It's time for our Money Matters segment of the week. 2020 is coming in for a landing, but there's still plenty of uncertainty for the markets and for the economy. Let's bring in Chris Cox. He's a finance executive and a fellow at the Liechtenstein Institute at Princeton University. We're also joined by George Say. He's the CEO of Annandale Capital. George, hiring slowed to about 245,000 jobs that were added last month. How concerned are you that this is a real indicator of kind of where the recovery is, if it's stalling because of COVID, or is it really just a function of a lot of media-driven hype over the virus? What's your thought on this?
It's a transitional statistic. It's not worthless or substantiveless. I mean, people who are filing unemployment claims, that matters, and we care about that all the time. But it's a transitional stat because we're about to get a vaccine. And once we get a vaccine, that's a game changer. And all these industries that have been pretty much shut down for almost a year now, whether it's airlines or restaurants or bars or hotels, things of that sort, are going to come ripping and roaring back. And so I think that the Democrats and the left who just want to spend oceans of money and tax us into oblivion will look at that and scream that we've got to spend trillions of dollars. And I think Republicans need to be more steadfast and put money on people who are really in dire straits right now and out of work and can't find anything to do and are at their last resort, but not spend like drunken sailors, because help's on the way. The vaccine's coming and it's going to change the country. We're going to have a huge economic growth spurt the first half of next year. And
of course, there were a lot of observers who said that we would still have over 10% unemployment. The number is at 6.7%. So we are still continuing to see a recovery, and there is more good news on the way. Chris, the Biden economic team was announced last week, Janet Yellen and others. What do you see in those names in terms of policy and proposals yet to come?
Well, I think with those names, you're ironically seeing a very mainstream sort of Democrat that's being selected by Joe Biden. You're not seeing these bomb throwers from the left necessarily. In fact, some of Joe Biden's nominees have been attacked by the left as not being progressive enough. So I think that you're really just seeing a return to your plain vanilla Democrat economic policy. And I think that ultimately with the Republican Senate, that's going to bode very well for markets. I think that with Republicans keeping the tax hikes to a minimum, if not at all, if the Republicans control the Senate, and a very sort of stable old line Democratic policy from the White House, I think that you could see a recipe for an economic boom next year. And as we've alluded to, if there's a coronavirus vaccine, then we're going to be in great shape for the economy over the next year.
George, this week, Larry Kudlow, the director of the President's Economic Council, endorsed $300 increases for unemployment benefits and extending those benefits through the first quarter of next year. And he wants to take that from $600 billion that was left over from the CARES Act to pay for it. To your earlier point, obviously we need to get help to people who need the help, but at some point, doesn't this really need to end?
Absolutely. It needs to end and soon. And I would salute Mr. Kudlow and Majority Leader McConnell, who have basically said about the same thing. Let's take money that has not been spent yet in the previous CARES Act and let's redirect it where it really needs to go right now. Let's not just throw money rashly around trying to make an impact where no money is needed. And I would say I don't think who's on Biden's economic team matters all that much. I think that basically this is a changed Democratic Party. And if you look at his tax policies and spending policies, they're not the same old from the Democrats. They're much more radical. They're trying to raise the tax rates to a huge extent, and they want to spend an unlimited amount on the Green New Deal and some of these other things that they all want, and it's imperative the Republicans hold the Senate. I would echo your other guest comment that it's very important the Republicans get 2 votes in the Senate to potentially offset Murkowski and Collins, who may vote against them at some point in time, and where they can block nonsense. And that will be great for the country because government will get out of the way and the private sector can work its magic.
Chris, my concern is that we're continuing to look at passing $1 trillion this and $1 trillion that and $800 billion here and there. The more that we do that, don't we help the left make the case for some form of universal basic income or an expanded dependent class? Your thoughts on that?
I think that's been one of the big issues that I salute Mitch McConnell, Senator McConnell, for fighting against, is this idea that we need to have a universal basic income. I mean, with the pandemic, there's been the thought that we could provide that. And quite frankly, I think it's good that people don't get used to that. We all know wherever a universal basic income has been tried, whether it's been in Europe or whether it's been in South America or other places, it has failed and failed miserably, and only economic despair has followed that. So we know that that's a recipe for failure. And then when you refer to the huge spending that is being proposed as a result of this pandemic, we all know that any government program that started is practically impossible to end. And when you're talking about trillions and trillions of dollars of spending, that's another recipe for sinking our economy, because it's just going to raise our debt, which will raise interest rates, which will make it very difficult for economic activity, real economic activity, to continue. So I think that it's good that the Republicans hold the line in the Senate, and they should be commended for that.
And George, there's a lot riding, as you were saying, on these Georgia Senate races in early January. Warnock and Ossoff, they're both either socialists or at least far-left Democrats. The top tax rate under the Biden plan would hit 55%. What would something like that do to this recovery across the board?
I love what the rapper, hip-hop artist, I don't know any of his music, but 50 Cent said that he did the math and realized that if Biden got everything he wanted, he'd be 20 cents instead of 50 cents, because 60% plus of his money was going to go to the federal government. He said, I think that's really bad for the country. I would urge every Trump loyalist and partisan Trump supporter out there that's watching the program, and I know there's thousands of them this morning, to be patriotic and do your duty as a citizen and vote for those two Republican candidates in Georgia, because those are the two votes that are going to prevent us from dropping into this socialist far-left tax and spend agenda. It's really important for the country that we do the patriotic thing early next year and get those two Republicans in.
All right. Christopher Nixon Cox and George Say, thanks so much. Straight ahead, football legend Darryl Green will be here as the NFL struggles with its COVID protocols. And one programming note, we will carry President Trump's rally in Georgia live tonight. Our coverage starts at 6:30 p.m. with Rob Schmidt here on Newsmax TV. We've got a big lineup. Dick Morris, RNC Convention Speaker Vernon Jones, former congressional candidate Angela Stanton King, and many more. You're not going to want to miss it. And we'll be right back.